Hi everybody. Here I'll be just demonstrating how to debug a remote Java application from your local IDE. So the need for this is that it is not always that you can set up the whole development stack or the development environment upon your local system, and it's in those cases that when you need to go ahead and debug some application running upon some other server that you would need to do this. So here I'd be using Netbeans IDE, where you have the source configured that you want to debug, obviously, and I have a local application deployed upon I mean another application server with some additional options enabled that allow us to actually debug the application. So there are two things to know. Like first, when you start when the target application that is which we are trying to debug should be started with options that enable another VM to attach to it through a socket and carry out the intended debugging. So to do that, when you are firing up that application, you will need to provide these parameters in pretty much this part of the parameters are the same for every application. What could change is the port address. So what you can see here is I have already deployed my application with these options and port number 8000. Okay, so now this application is up and running now. So what we need to do next is, like, I'm using the NetBeans IDE to debug it, but the same process almost goes for any IDE that supports remote debugging, including Eclipse. So here, as you can see, I have a Java file where I have put in certain breakpoints. I mean, this is just for demo purpose, but yeah. So what you should do is look for the debug menu and go to the attach debugger menu option, and here you would see a number of options. Like the debugger being used is JPDF by default, but if you have another debugger setup, you could configure it into NetBeans and use that instead. Now this option, make sure you select this socket attaches to the socket to other VMs, because that is what this DT socket debugging option means. So right now I have deployed this application upon my local server. That's why I have put this host name as localhost, but it could as well be any host over your company LAN, or even um, basically any deployed application that supports remote debugging. While mentioning this port, be careful that this port should be the same port number that you use to start up the application. Now this is pretty much it. Hit OK, and you should see some output on the NetBeans console saying that it has successfully submitted breakpoints and all those stuff. So now this application is ready for debugging. Now what I'll do is I'll fire up my application. This is my application, and I'll do some operation that um, executes this code in the background. So for me, this would be as simple as clicking this. And as you saw, I clicked here, and this guy is just waiting for this breakpoint to resume, and the socket attach caused the IDE or the debugging program to fire up, and it has successfully broken upon this breakpoint. Now at this point, you can do your usual debugging magic, what you always do in your from this point onwards, it's like debugging any normal Java program. um, so you have NetBeans has some wonderful support for debugging. You have all your in the usual windows like watches, variables, call stack, breakpoints, sources. Now this sources this can be a little important when you are debugging remote programs, because um, many times sometimes you will not see that the breakpoints that you have applied are actually breaking. If that is the case, probably the sources that should be in the class, that should be included in the debugging, have not been configured in this window. So what you could do here is you could just right click, add source root, and include your jars or the source jars, or the directory, whatever you wish to include. So, and then when you resume when you restart the debugging process, the code in question should allow for breaking on the breakpoints. Now you have this threads window. So at this point, the application has stopped here. So as I said, you can do your debugging thing here. You can go expand and see what this particular variable has, and then you can do your usual step over expression, step into, and step out. So just for some people who may not be very much well versed with these four operations, I'll just give a brief introduction to that. Step step over means, let's talk about this line. So when I step over it, it would actually not go into this function call and execute it line by line, but it would just execute it in the background and step on to the next line. For example, when I do a step over, it comes to this line. So it has not gone into this function, and it hasn't debugged. Means basically we do not want to go into the detailed debugging of this function. So that is where when you do a step over. Step into is something that when you want to go into every function call. For example, on this line there is no function call, so I'm just gonna step into a step over doesn't really are not very different for assignment statements or statements where there are no other function calls. Now here in this line, when I do a step into here, you would see that the program control would actually go into the CM delegate constructor. But if I did a step over, it would not go into the constructor and directly come here. So let's say, so you could see that it went into the CM delegate constructor. So I'm just going to step out of this right now because I don't really want to debug that. So that explains what step out does. So NetBeans additionally provides you with other app options like run to cursor, and one very cool option which is apply code changes. For example, I don't want this. I want to add one more line here, cm dot, for example, get class. Just for demo purpose, I just want to print this guy for, I just want to print it here. So I can just write the code here, and when I hit apply code changes, what you could see is, sorry, yeah, so you saw some output saying, where did it go? So basically, I couldn't find that output. Anyway, I mean, what it does, it goes and replaces your, yeah, here it is. So it goes and replaces your deployed code at runtime, which is really pretty cool. And then when you step over or resume the execution of the program, you could see that this line does get executed. So this is just a system out. So probably, I mean, it doesn't do anything particular as such, but you could very well uh, understand the utility and the ease of development that this feature brings about. If this were not there, what you would have to do is rebuild your changes, take the jar or the deployable, whatever it is, jar, year, or whatever your build is supposed to do. You need to upload it to your server which is running that program, and you need to bounce your server or restart it in order for the changes to take effect. So this saves you a hell lot of trouble, and which is really appreciated when you're trying when you're on tight schedules to deliver code. So this is pretty much it. When you can just resume the program and it would do what it is supposed to do. Okay, so for until next time, I hope you like this. Bye.